and welcome to Literary Hype. I am Stephanie, your literary hype woman, and today's author conversation explores a little bit of some controversial topics that happen to be present in the book Love and Bloom by Lucy Eden. This is about a woman who inherits a farm, and there's some shenanigans going on at this farm that she does not know about initially. And that's where all the controversy could come in, depending on your view on some things. So go into this with an open mind, that there might be something that you learn a little bit about today. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Lucy Eden. Well, welcome to Literary Hype, Lucy. It's so exciting to have you on to talk about your book, Love and Bloom.
Thank you so much for having me.
So for anyone who hasn't already seen this online or floating around their bookstores, tell us what the story is all about.
It's about Emma, who is a PR rep from Atlanta who's very good at her job, until suddenly she realizes that she has inherited a farm from her estranged grandparents. And when she goes to collect her inheritance, she discovers that it comes with a very handsome British Indian horticulturist and a lot of secrets. So she has to kind of navigate that. And there's a lot of, it's a Lucy Eden book, so there's a lot of hijinks, tomfoolery, and shenanigans, hijinks. And yeah, there's also a lot of angst and a fair amount of steam. So it's got all the things that you want in a story.
What was your initial spark for this book?
I have always been interested in medical marijuana. I believe it was Marie Claire. I want to say it was Marie Claire or Cosmo that I read an article, maybe it was like 10 or 15 years ago, about this family who had a son who had seizure disorders, and they actually ended up going to the UK to get medical marijuana for him. And I believe it was, they used CBD oil, for him, because they just couldn't get anything in the US. And even though most, medical professionals know that medical marijuana does have some medicinal properties, there's just not enough testing, not enough empirical data for the medical community to feel safe green lighting it for most things. That is slowly changing. There are more and more medical marijuana is becoming legal in more and more places, but we're still at the point where it's not accessible for everybody. So when I was given a chance to tell this story, I jumped at it because, obviously I had very, very strong feelings about it and very, very strong opinions. And yeah, I'm just grateful that, Honey Magnolia and Forever gave me the space and the opportunity to kind of bring this story to life with a humorous twist, because humor is a part of life. And yeah, I mean, that was the spark. It's just something that's really always interested me. I mean, I could talk about, research and, the things that kind of fuel this project forever, but I'm afraid I would lose you and pretty much most of your listeners. So I'll cut it there.
Research rabbit holes happen, but it's such a controversial topic. So how did you approach working such a controversial topic into a rom-com and trying to make sure that you don't lose your reader when you get to that point?
Really, the best thing to do is make your stories, and I think this is just across the board with any book, is make your stories as character driven as possible. So I always relate it to the characters. I didn't get into really too in depth into, the legal jargon, the more sinister aspects of running a marijuana farm. It's really about the people. It's really about the characters and who this is for, who this helps, how it affects everyone, even if they're not taking it. What's the emotional toll on doing something like this, even if you're doing it for the right reasons? So, yeah, I think that's something that everyone can relate to. just delving into the emotions and connecting those to, every circumstance and every situation.
You kind of hinted that the town really does have something at stake in this relationship as she's kind of developing things throughout. So what was it like to make it where it's not just a relationship that's doesn't mean anything to the people around it? This really is crucial to the community.
Yeah, I mean there are a lot of other things you can kind of pull from this. To sneak I like to do this with all my books. I like to sneak heavier topics into them even though they're rom-coms. But, there are a lot of American families, American farms who put pretty much most of the fresh food on our tables that are failing for, either they are being bought out by large companies or they are just not financially, able to sustain themselves. And that's like a real, real tragedy that is unfortunately going to come and bite us, all of us. I mean, I live in Brooklyn, New York, even though there are like some people who farm and grow their own stuff, but I'm like pretty far removed from the land and getting food from the land. But, with the failure of the American farm, if that is something that is realized and we are closer to that than a lot of us understand, that's when you go to the grocery store and blueberries are like $25 a pint. And you're like, well, how did this happen? And it's like, well, it's been happening and we haven't been paying attention. So, so in this, it is touched on a few times where, one of the big mysteries is how is this farm doing so well when, kind of farms around the countries just aren't. And also the farm is kind of it's the linchpin of the town. It holds the entire town together. So if that farm fails financially, it kind of takes the town with it. And because the farm is growing medical marijuana, it's also attracting people from all around the country, all around the world. So that means there are hospitality sector in the town, even though it's very, very small. The hospitality sector thrives. The restaurants thrive. The nearby hospitals thrive. Everyone is connected. The stores thrive. So it's, they are very, very interconnected, and this is how they're doing it.
One thing about Emma going into this story is that she's already in a relationship when we first meet her.
Yes.
And that can be very tricky as well. So talk a little bit about crafting a heroine who's already in a relationship.
No, I am totally smelling what you're stepping in. It's like, how do you get the audience to be okay with her being in a relationship with somebody else who is not the person she's in a relationship with in the beginning? Because as romance readers, like, you can tell by the cover or the blurb or whatever, going into it, this is not the hero. So what's happening here? So yeah, I mean, for Love and Bloom specifically, I think it's pretty evident even in the first or second chapter. The second chapter especially, it's pretty evident that Teddy is not the one for her. Even if Dan, wasn't an option, we don't want her we would rather her be single, honestly, than be in a relationship with Teddy. By the end of the second chapter, we're like, oh, this is not good. So we want something better for her. And by that time, we already know Dan exists. And we know that Dan, even though he did not know her, their start was very contentious. He still went out of his way to make sure she was okay. And it's like, okay, now imagine that from a guy who actually cared about her. Like, oh my God, this is it. Like, let's get these two together.
And you also don't want your female man character to be judged too much for why is she still in this relationship, and kind of figuring out where you need to go with Lee on that end as well.
Yeah. And I think that's another reason why I love writing in first person, because you are in the character's head. And Emma, at this point in her life, that Emma's kind of just going with the flow with her life, and she just wants to make everyone in her life happy. And she really doesn't know another way. Her happiness is not a priority for her.
There's a line in this book where she's talking about like not realizing that Teddy's ambition was actually narcissism. And
Mhm.
that's kind of a really fascinating way to think about things sometimes. Like when you're in the relationship, you might not notice the problem because you're thinking it's something else.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about crafting that aspect of their relationship between Emma and Teddy.
Emma has grown up in a world full of really ambitious people, really high achievers. So this isn't something new for her until she's introduced to something new, which is, Dan. And, one of the lines she has with Dan is the dichotomy of, just dealing with people who are, their greatest, their greatest ambitions are winning an Oscar or an election or, world domination. They want power. They want this. That's the world she's used to. And just to meet somebody who just wants to make the world a little more beautiful and their deepest desire is to help people, that is something that she's never experienced before. So just being around Dan and the people in the town, it's really introduced her to a new way of seeing the world and a new way of thinking. So when Teddy comes back into her life, it's very easy to see that, yes, this is narcissism. This is selfishness. He doesn't care about people. He doesn't care about helping or doing anything good. He just wants to further his own ambitions.
Backstory is so important to this book. So are you a plotter or a pantser, or do you just let it figure out the backstories as you go? Like, what's your process on that?
So I am what's called a planter, where I have a skeleton. And that's just because I also have ADHD and I don't want to get too off track when I'm writing a story. But most backstories come to me in the moment. They just kind of pop into my head fully formed. Like there was a story about Emma's mother as a child, and that kind of shaped the person who she was. It was told from the perspective of her childhood best friend, who was talking to Emma about who her mother was as a child. And that story just kind of popped into my head, and I just thought it was like so sweet and so perfect. And yeah, a lot of the backstories just kind of come to me as I get to know the characters, because backstory is important. Who you were yesterday is an important part of who you are today. So I also think it's important to include that, and also important to kind of explain a character's behavior. Like things don't just come out of nowhere. Decisions don't come out of nowhere. Choices don't come out of nowhere. They're really just kind of informed from your past, from, you're making decisions based on the knowledge that you have, the information that you have. Where does that information come from?
There's so many great tropes throughout this story.
Yeah.
How do you approach picking what ones you want to put in the book, and what ones are your favorites to play with?
Oh boy. I think enemies to lovers is a lot of fun to play with, because I love sarcasm and I love, people who really kind of dig into each other. So that's always fun to play with. But I really love all tropes. I don't have any tropes that I don't like. I feel like every story needs to have at least three, because in life, people are never just one thing, and you never have just one challenge at a time, if only. You always have more than one thing happening. So it's like you are like, okay, so here's the trope deck that I did with Fairy Plot Mother. So yeah, so you can have a story where, there's more than one thing going on. So it could be like your first love, but also like one of you gets amnesia and someone is betrayed. And
Those
that's
go together so well right off the bat.
They do, because if somebody has amnesia and you pretend like you kind of form, because I wrote an amnesia story where you're just kind of like going with the flow and not telling the amnesiac the truth about themselves. That's a betrayal. Oh my God, wait, these were actually the tropes. I shuffled the deck, I swear, but these were the tropes for that for
That's
that story.
hilarious.
Wild. It's called Head Over High Heels, and it's an overboard retelling because I'm obsessed with that movie. Because who isn't? It's so good.
I listened to part of this book on audio.
Yes.
So talk what it's like for you as an author to hear your words come back in someone else's voice.
I love to tell the story. I primarily get my books through audio. I am an audiophile. Started listening to audiobooks when I was 9 years old. I used to go to the library, and I would get my first audiobooks were Stephen King, and they would come in these huge things, and there'd be like 16 cassette tapes. That's how old I am. They'd be 16 cassette tapes, and you'd have to make sure that they were like rewound all the around to the beginning because some jerk, the last jerk who like, you know, borrowed it, just like stuck the tapes back in and brought it back. So yeah, I listen to hundreds of audiobooks a year. That is not hyperbole. So audiobooks are something, especially when it comes to my work, it is something that I take very seriously. Probably the most serious. It's probably the thing I care the most about. Like, not the cover, not the this, not the that. It's like, who's doing the audio? Which is probably why I only have like 3 books in audio, but I'm okay with that. But yes, this book was narrated by Wesley Siobhan, who also did Blind Date with a Book Boyfriend, which coincidentally I was listening to when we started our call. She did Blind Date with a Book Boyfriend with Oscar Reyes, and that audiobook is magic if you have not heard it. So yes, Wesley Siobhan did such an amazing job that there were parts of the book that I laughed out loud at, and I wrote the book, and her delivery just made it funnier. I don't know if you've gotten to this part yet, but you know, there's Teddy's mom, who I wish I could have written more about her because she's such a character. But yeah, she made Teddy's mom just hilarious for me. And I wrote the book. So yeah, another thing I worry about with audiobook narrators is that, you know, when some narrators, they say to themselves, okay, I'm reading a romance book and I know that there's sex in here somewhere. So everything has to sound like the horniest thing. And it's like the character's like at the grocery store and it's like, this is uncomfortable to listen. Like, what is going on here? So, yeah, so Wesley Siobhan has amazing accent work, amazing comedic timing. You know, there are parts in the book where she's crying and I'm crying, you know, so, you know, she's somebody who really gave an insanely good performance, and I could not be happier about it.
I saw online that you have been doing some scavenger hunts when you're making convention appearances. So where did you
Yeah.
get the idea to have your books be at other authors' tables to help kind of build that community?
It popped into my head literally like the beginning of, I think Steamy Lit was the first one I did it. It just kind of popped into my head and I was like, wouldn't it be fun if people had to go to other authors' tables? Because that's what they're doing anyway, to find this book. And it was great because I had gotten those copies complimentary from Forever. So I was like, this isn't even my money. Like, let's really like have some fun with these copies of these books. So the other reason, I am a huge community person. I love working with other authors, meeting with other authors, promoting other authors. I think I really think it's a lot of fun. And I approached some authors that I did know. I approached authors that I didn't know. And yeah, I love that. And I loved when somebody would come back with the book and say, hey, I never heard of this author before, but I bought some of her books while I was at her table. So yay. And also for the scavenger hunt, it's a picture of the author's cover, but their name is blocked out. So you have to know whose book that is in order to get the free book. So yeah, people were working, which is great. People were really working to find those books, which I love. So it's something I will continue to keep doing. Because I do think it's fun. It's not intrusive for the author because I'm also mindful of, okay, if this is too complicated, they've got a line of people. Is this something that they're going to even want to do at a signing? And yeah, it was great. It was great. The authors loved it. The readers loved it. I love it. I love giving stuff away. I love games. I hope other authors copy me. Some other authors were like, I'm going to do that at my signing. I was like, do it, please. So yeah, it's fun. It makes it a little more fun.
There's nothing like chasing down free books that brings readers together.
Hello.
I literally just came from a book festival and we made so many friends in line. It was like, have you seen any code words today?
Yep.
Sharing all that info.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And like teaming up and working together, like, yes, do it. It's great. And it also lets you know kind of like that the authors are fun. Like, I feel like if somebody asks me, like, oh, what's the vibe of your books? Like, what kind of book? And I'm like, it's me. I'm the vibe. Like, if you meet me, you kind of know like how my books are because I'm kind of the same way. So I'm like serious but funny and, very creative. And yeah, what you see is what you get.
But there's one thing that's not quite what you see is what you get, and that is your name. Is there
Yes.
a fun little story of how you chose Lucy Eden as your pseudonym?
I have like a million reasons why I chose Lucy Eden. So technically, Lucy Eden is a short name that you can put in big print on books. So that was like a good, and it's also easy to say, easy to spell, easy to remember. Like all my social media is Lucy Eden or Lucy Eden author. So it's very easy to find me. So that was like the first main concern. Lucy is always a name that I loved. Lucy, the parish of St. Lucy is my favorite part of Barbados. If you ever go to Barbados, it's the parish that's at the very top. These gorgeous, gorgeous cliffs. What else? Lucy is the name of the oldest skeleton in the world. So she's basically the mother of humanity, a variation of the name Lucifer, who everyone knows is the devil, but he also started out as an angel and God's favorite, and Lucifer, the name means bringer of light. So, it's kind of a person who, may or may not be misunderstood depending on how you kind of go down that road. And if you watch, the popular TV shows where Lucifer is a character, he's always depicted as a little deeper than, a little more than meets the eye. Like the show Lucifer, he's actually like a good guy, which is kind of funny. If you watch the show Supernatural, the character of Lucifer, like he's like always like this close to being a good guy, but it just like never works out for him. Yeah, it's just just a lot of like really great things to talk about when you talk about the name Lucy. I just think it's an awesome name.
Awesome. Well, the last question we always ask, because this is literary hype, what books are you hyped about right now?
That is like asking me what my favorite star in the sky is.
It really is the meanest question I could ask.
It's so mean. Okay, so I would say Realsy Adams has a Christmas story coming out, which I'm very excited about. Deja Brew, I believe, is the third in the Celestine Martin's Witchy trilogy, and Mama Loves Witches. That's like all that's popping into my head, but I have like so many books and arcs and things popping up, and I'm also a person who reads the same books over and over again. I was literally reading one of my own books this morning, so I'm like the worst person to ask. But yeah, that's like all that's popping into my head right now. But I think that, I think every book is something to get excited about, and especially as readers who read primarily romance books, we will read so many books that you might read 10 books in 1 week, and somebody's like, well, what was your favorite, or what are you reading now? And you're like, I don't know the title, I don't know the author, but the cover was green and they had a bakery and he had a pet dog named Spike, and it was really good and you should read it. Because you've read like 10 books that week and you're like, I don't know anything about the book except how it made me feel, and it made me feel great, and that's why I think you should also read it.
The number of people who come into the bookstore and like, I don't remember the name or the author, but it was green.
Yeah, that's how my
Good
books
luck.
actually, yeah, my books actually used to be color coded. I need to fix them and I'm want to give away a lot of them. But that's how I remember what books are. I remember what color the covers are. Yeah.
Clearly, I also have a rainbow problem.
Yes, I saw that and I was like, "Oh, that's so brilliant," because she's going to know exactly where all of her books are.
And someone talked about it as like an easier way, but because I also am pretty ADHD, of
Mhm.
you're more likely to put it away when it's by color than trying to figure out where it goes in the alphabet.
If there's a shelf of blue books and there's just like an orange book in the middle, you'll be like, "Nope. No, no, no. No, 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 no,
And
no."
this is very unhinged right now, and I haven't fixed it in a while, but it
This is
still looks
incredible.
nice.
No, this is, yeah, for me this is unhinged and it looks terrible. Yeah. Even though like these are all like this is separated out because these are all cookbooks and I need to move them into my kitchen, but I just hate the way they look. And this is I just got like a shipment of books from Forever and I was like, you know, it's yeah. So next time you interview me, hopefully this will look a little more cohesive.
Well, thanks so much for taking time to talk to Literary Hype about Love and Bloom.
Thank you so much for making the time for me, and I had an absolute blast, and I will love to come back anytime. Everybody go read Love and Bloom, and I cannot wait to hear everyone's feedback. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks again to Lucy for hanging out with me and talking about all things Love in Bloom. If you'd like to get a hold of this book or some of the other ones that she mentioned, the links to do so are going to be down in the description for you. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the Literary Hype channel, and share this with a friend. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.